Hello, everybody. I am Keaton of Kinetic Catholic Ministries here on Season 13, Episode 14. I hope that you all are having a lovely October so far. Halloween's coming up, which is always an exciting time. What I wanted to talk about today is something that I've probably mentioned in passing in past episodes, but fully sit down and talk about what it means to be tolerant. Should we, as Catholics, be tolerant of everybody else's beliefs? We're told that we should all the time. Is that something that we should actually act on? And I think that this is something to really dive into and to fully come to understand, because the word tolerant can be seen as a lot of ways. And so we need to be able to define it. We need to understand what it means to be tolerant and how we as Catholics, if we as Catholics, should fully act on it. So, I want to look at the Standard Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Sorry, not Standard, Stanford. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy has a really good definition for toleration. It defines toleration as: to put up with, countenance, or suffer generally refers to the conditional acceptance of or non-interference with beliefs, actions, or practices that one considers to be wrong but still tolerable, such that they should not be prohibited or constrained. It goes on to say, it is essential for the concept of toleration that the tolerated beliefs or practices are considered to be objectionable and in an important sense wrong or bad. If this objection component is missing, we do not speak of toleration, but of indifference or affirmation. So I know those were a lot of big words. I want to fully dive into what that means. So basically, to tolerate something means to put up with something, right? To not necessarily force it, to not necessarily go against it, to believe against it, but to not full on push back and say, no, you're not allowed to believe that. Rather, to put up with it, right? Non-interference. Now, the second part is kind of something that our world is missing today, right? Now, for something to be tolerated, it means that those beliefs or practices have to be considered wrong or bad. If we're tolerating something that we don't see as wrong or bad, then we're speaking of indifference or affirmation. That's not what toleration means. That's not what being tolerant means. Being tolerant means putting up with beliefs or opinions that you disagree with, or even actions that you disagree with. I like to sort of explain it in terms of a human relationship, right? When we're friends with someone, there are certain things with that person that we should and shouldn't tolerate, right? If that person is just straight up a jerk to us a lot of times, is just straight up mean to us, we see that as bad. To tolerate it would be to continue to put up with it, to continue to stay in that relationship, in that friendship with that person, despite the fact that we know that how that person is treating us is a wrong thing, right? That's an example of when toleration is bad. We shouldn't tolerate that. If someone's just being a jerk to us, we should want to get out of the relationship. We should want to get out of the friendship. Not in a way that's rude or mean or angry to that person at all, because, again, we're all made in God's image and likeness. We are to love our neighbor as ourselves, and we are to get our neighbor up into the eternal kingdom of heaven. But it's important to understand that there are some things that we shouldn't be tolerant of. And again, that human friendship, if someone lies to us a lot, if someone goes behind our back and we stay in a friendship with that person, that's a bad sign. That's an example of when tolerance isn't a good thing, right? Of when, no, I shouldn't be tolerating this anymore. I need to move out of this relationship, and I need to move out of this friendship while still continuing to pray for that person and love that person. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is a good thing. The issue is many people interchange the word tolerance with approval in today's society. And that's when it becomes an issue. To tolerate something does not mean to approve of it. And so when we're talking about should we as Catholics, should we be tolerant of other beliefs, right? We hear it all the time. Be tolerant of all religions. Be tolerant of all beliefs. In how tolerance is actually defined, yes, we should be. Right? We shouldn't force our Catholicism onto anybody. While we truly desire everybody to be Catholic, because we know that Catholicism is the one true Catholic faith, to force that to somebody, that's not doing God's will. God gave us free will for a reason, to freely choose Him. We should want people to freely choose Him. So when it comes to putting up with other religions, stuff like that, we should, because we don't want to be forceful upon anything, right? We should. Okay, we should tolerate that in how in what tolerance actually means, to put up with something that we see as bad or wrong. But in the sense that tolerance means approval, which it doesn't, but people in today's society interchange the two too much, that's when it becomes an issue. Just because we're tolerating something doesn't mean that we approve of it. Just because we tolerate another religion, just because we tolerate people who think differently or those actions, doesn't mean that we approve of that thinking differently. Doesn't mean that we think that that religion is true. Doesn't mean that we approve of that religion. And there's a big distinction, and we need to be careful the more that we talk about it. Tolerance involves putting up with things that we disagree with. But there's a limit, okay? I talked about other religions, yeah, that's a good example, but there's a limit to what we should tolerate. And I want to go back to sort of the example of talking about a human friendship. In our modern world, we are asked to tolerate increasingly troublesome behavior. Behavior that not only leads people away from God, but that leads people away from each other, that creates division, that is evil. There's a lot of examples that I can think of that I'm not going to bring up on here. But ultimately things that go against family values and things that accompany the declining family structure in our country. Things like that, when it comes to tolerating it, yeah, we shouldn't force anybody to think differently, but we also shouldn't put up with those things. We shouldn't just sit back and say, you know what, I disagree, but it's okay, go ahead. No, because those things that destroy family values that society tells us to tolerate, those things are ultimately affecting so many people outside of the Catholic Church in such a negative light. It's not just leading people away from God, which is even worse. That's a terrible thing. It's creating so many divisions. And again, I'm not going to bring up all the examples on here for a reason, but I'm sure that you can think of some or that you can think of some that I'm thinking of right now. And I would love to bring up examples because that'd make explaining it a lot easier, but I'm not going to for this video specifically. But guys, if we sit back and we say, yeah, that's fine. Don't force it on me, but no, that's fine. Go ahead, do your thing. That's not good. And again, it all depends. It's all situational. It all depends on the exact matter. But guys, should we be tolerant of other people? Absolutely. Should we be tolerant of other religions? Absolutely. But when it comes to being tolerant of things that destroy our society, things that destroy family values, things that destroy Christianity, destroy Catholicism, things that directly go against God's will, that's not a good thing. That's when it becomes an issue. I'm not saying that we should be rude to those people. I'm not saying that we should be aggressive to those people, that we should force anybody to think differently, because that's not possible, right? That's not good. That's not a good thing. But what we should do is not necessarily put up with it, okay? We should be willing to stand our ground as Catholics and in a kind, loving manner say, no, I disagree with that, and I don't think that's right, and I'm sick of allowing that to happen. And so again, toleration, it can be twisted different ways, and that's why it's so difficult to explain and talk about sometimes, because it's oftentimes situational. What do you mean by tolerance, right? What is it that I should be tolerating? But guys, people get confused, and they try to say in society that when we disagree with something or that when we don't approve of something, somehow we're not tolerating it. That's not true, okay? Just because we disagree with something, just because we disapprove of something, doesn't mean that we aren't tolerating it, okay? The reality is, many people of faith think that the limits of tolerant, of what we tolerate, have kind of gone too far, have exceeded it, and have exceeded the limit of what we should tolerate as Catholics. And I'm not fully going to get into that. But what I will say is at the end of the day, God calls us to love each and every individual. When I'm talking about a lack of toleration, I'm talking about when it comes to other people's kind of opinions. There are some opinions that go too far and that we shouldn't tolerate, right? It's kind of the same thing with the human friendship, that there are some things where if a friend is lying to us, if a friend is a jerk with us, we shouldn't tolerate that. And we should want to get out of that friendship. And in the same way, we should want to stand up to those opinions that we know are hurting Catholicism in every sense of the word. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't love the person. Guys, ultimately, when it comes to tolerance and approval, those are two very, very different things. And the more that we start to mix them together, the more that we start to combine them, the more dangerous that becomes. Because ultimately, there's a clear and distinct difference. And just because we tolerate something, just because we put up with it, doesn't mean that we approve of it or that we think it is right. So now that the topic is done, do y'all know what it is time for now? It's time for
the Saint of the Week.
And today's saint of the week is Saint Ignatius of Antioch, whose feast day was actually yesterday as of when this is posted. That's Monday the 17th. Now, St. Ignatius of Antioch's story is pretty wild. He was born not long after Christ was born in Syria. So he's going back far when we're talking about saints, right? He became bishop of Antioch. He was a convert to Christianity, truly devout in his faith. He's really known for 7 letters that he wrote on his journey from Antioch to Rome, 5 of which were to churches in Asia Minor, in which he encouraged them to remain faithful to God. Now, The reality is he was growing up at a time of very heavy Christian persecution, right? Not just growing up in that time, but living in that time as bishop. And so when he would try to call out heresies, provide people with Christian truth, he got in some trouble for that. And as a result, he was to be martyred. But what's really, really beautiful is rather than ask to be saved, his final letter is kind of not what you would expect it to be. His final letter reads, the only part of it is, the only thing I ask of you is to allow me to offer the libation of my blood to God. I am the wheat of the Lord. May I be ground by the teeth of the beast to become the immaculate bread of Christ. He was to be eaten by lions. So rather than show fear for that, he says, may I be ground by the teeth of the beast to become the immaculate bread of Christ. That's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. He eventually, bravely and courageously, met the lions, was eaten by the lions in the Circus Maximus. But wow, talk about a beautiful story, and talk about a beautiful letter, right? That last letter written. When we're talking about tolerance, when we're talking about what it means that the Catholic Church is true, how we should stand up for the truth of the faith without necessarily approving things that contradict Catholicism, because again, there's a difference between tolerance and approval. It's important to understand that St. Ignatius of Antioch is such a great saint to look through for that. As someone who is so devout in his faith that he was brave enough to not fear martyrdom, but take it head on. St. Ignatius of Antioch, pray for us. So before you guys click off this video, I'm not just a YouTuber, I'm also a Catholic speaker. So if you want to book me to come and speak, please go to the kineticcatholicministries.com website and click the Contact Us page for details about that. Or please email us directly at kineticcatholicministries@gmail.com. Please go check out the new shop, Kinetic Catholic, or the new website, kineticcatholicministries.com. So many awesome things you can do on there, including a shop. So don't forget to check that out. Please comment any saint or topic suggestions that you might have for future videos. Please like the video. Please click the red subscribe button down below and the bell next to it. That way you get notified when I come out with a new video. And all 3 of our social medias are in the description down below. So again, thank you guys for watching. I hope you all are having an absolutely lovely October. I know that I am. This was Keaton of Kinetic Catholic Ministries. I will see you all next week. And hi, Brielle.